he got jealous of me because I didn't break my nose or anything like that. He would kind of just beat me up, kick me in the body, or...
He's played war machines, assassins, and cold-blooded slayers, but Dolph Lundgren's real-life grudges might be more brutal than anything he's done on screen. In this video, he finally breaks the silence on 5 actors who pushed him too far. This isn't just about bruised egos or creative tension. We're talking on-set meltdowns, icy standoffs, and one infamous stare-down that nearly turned into a full-on fight. One actor even tried to rewrite his movie mid-shoot. So, who made Dolph's no-go list? Stick around, the names may surprise you, and the reasons cut deeper than a roundhouse kick.
Met you, he said that he hated you. How do you feel about that?
Number 5. Jean-Claude Van Damme. When it comes to on-screen rivals, few match the physicality and presence of Jean-Claude Van Damme. But behind the scenes, the real fireworks came not from fists or roundhouse kicks. They came from clashing egos, broken promises, and an alpha showdown that's lasted decades. Dolph Lundgren and Van Damme might have played brutal enemies on screen, but the truth is, the tension was all too real. And it started the moment Universal Soldier brought them together in 1992. At the time, both men were action stars with international fan bases. Van Damme was riding high off Bloodsport and Kickboxer, with his signature high kicks and cocky grin making him a favorite of the martial arts movie crowd. Lundgren, by contrast, was the stoic giant, best known for his iconic role as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV. When producers cast them as rival super soldiers in Universal Soldier, it was billed as the ultimate face-off. But while the script called for a futuristic grudge match, the real tension started between takes, long before the cameras started rolling. From the start, Van Damme and Lundgren were at odds with each other. On the set, Van Damme was said to be an unpredictable performer who constantly ad-libbed and turned up late, always angling to get more screen time, while Lundgren was highly disciplined in his approach and error-free, and military in terms of his acting. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Crew members noted that Dolph treated the production like a military operation: call times, professionalism, and respect. Van Damme, he treated it like a party. And that was one source of friction. The other was a battle for supremacy. Both men wanted to be the star, and there was only room for one at the top. Tension mounted in 1992 during the Cannes Film Festival premiere of Universal Soldier, with what should have been a festive occasion descending into tabloid antics. The cameras were trained on the action as Van Damme suddenly beckoned Dolph for a confrontation in front of a huge crowd. Accounts vary as to precisely what Van Damme said, but the message was clear. He wanted to settle matters there and then. Van Damme reportedly challenged Dolph to a public fight in front of the astonished press. Unmoved and towering, Dolph walked up close, and both men were forcibly separated. The stare-down was in full view of the photographers. The footage of the near brawl was splashed across newspapers. What should have been a perfect press tour ended up becoming a PR disaster, or the ideal action movie marketing, depending on who you ask. The tension did fade after Cannes. For the next few years, there was little said about the incident in public between the two, but sources indicated there was animosity. The next collaboration after this incident was on The Expendables 2, in 2012, 2 full decades after Universal Soldier. By then, both men were older, a bit mellower, and perhaps a bit more open to working with one another. But still, according to reports by some of the crew, old habits were hard to shake. Van Damme wanted his own way. Dolph wanted to do it his way. And while the two men continued with the production without ever getting into public disputes, those who were there on the set knew that tensions were still boiling under the surface. Since then, Dolph Lundgren has become even more vocal regarding the professional working relationship between Lundgren and his counterpart. He has been measured in delivering his views through interviews. He describes intense and emotional, but usually with the motivation of ego, as the funny aspect of working with Van Damme. During interviews, when asked if he loves working with Van Damme, it is usually accompanied by a pause, followed by a very careful choice of words by Lundgren before answering. He doesn't trash Van Damme, but he also doesn't give him praise. That silence speaks volumes. In fact, you couldn't get two people more opposed to each other. That is, in terms of market action hero. He is flash, flair, and big energy. The showman, spinning kicks and smirking one-liners. Lundgren epitomizes power, control, and quiet intimidation. He doesn't need to shout, his presence does the talking. Put two in the same room, and sparks would for sure fly. There was never going to be mutual respect, at least not then. What they had instead was a competition, one where both men refused to back down. The fans of Universal Soldier might say their chemistry was electric, and they would be quite right. That fight at the end, brutal, vicious, and explosive, felt less like acting than it did the climax of everything playing out behind the camera. If we look at it like this, maybe the friction was good for the movie, but it also drove a wedge between two men who could have been allies in a genre where loyalty and mutual back-patting are considered the norm. Now, looking back decades later, it seems ridiculous. The public challenges, the near brawls, the burning stares. But at the time, it was personal. It was pride. And for Lundgren, that permanently etched Van Damme onto his list of most hated actors, not for the one fight, but the pattern. Dishonor, disrespect, and ignorance of when to back off. Whether they're rivals for real or not, one thing is for sure. To Dolph, Jean-Claude Van Damme was an on-screen nemesis and an off-screen thunderstorm he never wanted to see again. If you think this feud is intense, wait until you hear who made Dolph's top spot. Number 4. Steven Seagal. If Hollywood had a Hall of Fame for difficult co-stars, Steven Seagal would likely have his own wing. For Dolph Lundgren, working with Seagal wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. Though they never shared a leading role in a major blockbuster together, their paths crossed often enough to spark a simmering resentment that never quite faded. To Dolph, Seagal wasn't just a fellow action star. He was a walking embodiment of everything that could go wrong when ego outpaces talent. The friction started not on a film set, but in the tight-knit world of martial arts and action circles in the late 80s and early 90s. Both men had real fighting credentials. Dolph, a European karate champion and legitimate black belt. Seagal, an Aikido master with a dojo in Japan. But where Dolph carried his accomplishments with quiet pride, Seagal had a habit of loudly reminding everyone how dangerous he was. It wasn't uncommon to hear Seagal boast about his supposed connections to the CIA or claim he could slay a man in seconds. For Lundgren, who valued discipline, humility, and hard-earned respect, that kind of talk came off as posturing, and it rubbed him the wrong way from the very beginning. Dysfunction-prone, they lit up during the different industry events, interviews, and panels side by side for the promo of the golden era action movies. Seagal would always nab the talk and throw into disarray everybody's conversation, manipulating it to his own advantage. Only on rare occasions did he consider that the man standing beside him had played a major role in the genre. Instead, he'd refer to other stars as kids playing dress-up, a thinly veiled insult Lundgren did not miss. When at one point asked about Seagal's behavior during a press junket, Dolph simply replied, keeping his lips closely pursed, Some people enjoy the sound of their voice while others get on with business. In one of the less than honorable meetings to discuss a potential ensemble action film in the early 2000s, other action stars collaborated. It was a project that never went anywhere, with many saying it is Seagal's fault. Crew members reported that Seagal wanted script control, refused to lose any fight on screen, and would not allow any other actor to even look stronger than him in the film. Dolph was to have starred opposite Seagal, but when he heard of the clauses that Seagal was attempting to include in his contracts, he simply walked off. He was quoted as saying, "I have fought tougher opponents in real life, and they didn't need lighting cues or stunt doubles to win." Stunt teams made it worse for Seagal. Whereas Seagal was said to have bullied stunt teams in physical setups of scenes, Dolph was the opposite. He was respectful and worked collaboratively. Over the years, several stunt performers have come out to say Seagal sometimes went too far in fight scenes, applying real joint locks or striking with more than necessary force. While some called it his commitment to realism, others saw it for what it truly was: reckless and dangerous. Dolph, having spent years refining his control in martial arts, felt that, of all things, inflicting pain on props was one. He went on to add, "If you hurt people during a performance, you're not a martial artist. You're just a bully with a camera crew." There was, in addition to physical demeanor, the factor of attitude. Seagal was often said to have put himself away from both cast and crew on movie shoots, traveling in entourages, demanding his own trailers with security details, and referring to himself in the third person. Dolph, of course, low maintenance and consummate producer-wise, found diva behavior to be tiresome. The producers came to him with an offer to star alongside Seagal in a medium-budget action movie shot in Eastern Europe, and Dolph wasted little time in rejecting it, bluntly stating, "I don't work with people who think the script revolves around their aura." The tension built up during the preliminary stages of planning a sequel to The Expendables. The assemblage franchise thrives on the legacy created by joining two iconic action stars together in one film, but not everyone is invited to the party. Rumor had it that he was in the conversation as being approached for a role and actually was interested. But, according to insiders, Dolph was one of the most vocal opponents behind the scenes. It was reported that he told producers that if Seagal was cast in the role, he would walk away. It was not a matter of envy or competition. It was all about safeguarding the integrity of the production. Over the years, Seagal would ironically suggest he didn't understand why a handful of action stars don't want to work with him. But not so for Dolph, who had reasons clear enough. Professionalism came first for him. Whether that meant being prepared, respecting the crew, or knowing when to share the limelight, Dolph felt every actor had obligations to the project and the people around him. As he saw it, Seagal had consistently failed to meet that standard. What makes their feud all the more interesting is that it never erupted into public shouting matches or tabloid showdowns. Rather, it manifested itself in quiet refusals, behind-the-scenes vetoes, and barely concealed insults in interviews. But sometimes silence is louder than words. For Lundgren, this was a personal professional issue. Number 3. Tom Berenger. Tom Berenger isn't typically the first name that comes to mind when you think of Hollywood feuds. He's not flashy, not tabloid-prone, and often plays rugged, introspective characters rather than loud, over-the-top personas. But for Dolph Lundgren, his working relationship with Berenger was so deeply frustrating that it earned the actor a permanent place on his personal blacklist. Their time together on a low-profile action thriller in the early 2000s was supposed to be routine. Instead, it turned into a drawn-out exercise in patience. and eventually, a test of respect. The film, which never reached mainstream audiences, was meant to be a gritty, straight-to-video, war-themed action flick. Berenger was brought on as the lead, while Lundgren signed on for a significant supporting role. On paper, it looked promising. Two seasoned actors, both familiar with the action genre, both with solid reputations for performing under tough conditions. But almost from day one, the chemistry between them was off, not just on screen, but behind the scenes as well. According to crew members, Berenger arrived with a chip on his shoulder. Though the budget was modest and the schedule tight, he carried himself like he was the only name that mattered. He reportedly spent long hours in his trailer, emerging late to set and often appearing distracted or disinterested. That in itself might have been manageable. But what truly got under Dolph's skin was Berenger's attitude during scenes, a constant undermining of direction, frequent unsolicited script suggestions, and an overwhelming sense that Berenger believed the project needed to be elevated by him. It would be maddening for Dolph, who learned efficiency and humility from both European and American productions. He wasn't trying to make an Oscar-winning movie. It was a boots-on-the-ground action vehicle meant to entertain. And yet Berenger treated every scene like it was Shakespeare, demanding rewrite after rewrite, or requesting psychological layers for characters whose purpose was to blow things up and get out. Typically, even-keeled, Dolph started to bristle under the constant delays and derailments. One of the more telling moments came during filming for the climactic standoff. It was supposed to see Berenger's character hold Lundgren's at gunpoint, a good, simple, classic action moment with great intensity, but no. Berenger wanted the words added, "I need a moment of shared trauma between the characters," and then launched into several very long, rambling monologues on every possible after effect of being in the war. Regrets about wartime, post-traumatic stress disorder, and forgiveness. It brought the energy of the scene to a grinding halt. Dolph tried to keep it professional, but at the fifth take, with Berenger continuing to improvise and not listening to cues, he just walked off set. Not in a huff, not shouting, just done. Behind the scenes, it is reported that Dolph told the director and producers that he could not continue working in those conditions. He would finish the project, provided that his own scenes were worked out in such a way that he would avoid interaction with Berenger. The picture was nearly complete. However, tensions had boiled down that the final few days of shooting had to be scheduled in such a way as to keep them as far apart from each other as possible. It was not so much an all-out meltdown, but the verdict was in. They would never work together again. Outside the set, the fallout lingered. Berenger allegedly requested the trimming and repositioning of some of Lundgren's scenes to better highlight the emotional arc of his character during post-production. The editors refused, but rumors had it that word had gotten to Dolph. For him, that wasn't just creative control. Rather, it was an act of sabotage driven by ego. He considered it a blatant disregard for collaboration amongst his peers and a lack of respect for the work put in by his team. Later in promotional interviews for the movie, Berenger hardly talked about Lundgren, and when he did, it was short and vague. Dolph was rather diplomatic in public, but his friends say it really affected him. Allegedly, in one candid off-the-record moment during a European press tour, he remarked to one reporter, "He's the kind of guy who wants to turn every role into a monologue, even when it's supposed to be a firefight." Dolph is saying that, from Europe, thinking back with some bitterness, that the whole experience was very unnecessary. Dolph went into the project unconsciously looking for a fight. He was uncomfortable standing up to Berenger. He just wanted professionalism and mutual respect. two things he found sorely lacking during the entire production. And in all their years in the business, on more than one occasion, he has dealt with titanic egos and knows how to handle them. Keep your jaw off the floor. This next actor took things way past personal. Number 2, Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke is the kind of actor who brings everything to a role. Intensity, unpredictability, and a level of rawness that few can match. But for Dolph Lundgren, working with Rourke wasn't so much inspiring as it was maddening. While the two had mutual respect early in their careers and even moved in some of the same action thriller circles, things took a turn when they finally shared screen time. The behind-the-scenes dynamic quickly shifted from professional curiosity to pure aggravation, and Lundgren left the experience with a bitter taste and a story he wouldn't soon forget. Their main collaboration came on the set of a gritty ensemble film where both were cast as hardened veterans of war, ex-assassins pulled into one final mission. On paper, it sounded like an action fan's dream. Both actors brought real-life grit to their performances. Rourke, with his rugged charm and maverick energy, and Lundgren, with his steely composure and imposing physical presence. But from the first day of filming, it became clear they had completely different interpretations of what it meant to commit to a role. Rourke approached the part like a tortured poet, ad-libbing long philosophical rants during scenes, adding backstory elements no one agreed on, and randomly changing his character's motivations on the spot. Lundgren, known for his disciplined, no-nonsense preparation, found himself reacting not to another actor, but to a one-man show. Their scenes together, which were meant to have a tight, tactical feel, quickly became unpredictable and chaotic, thanks to Rourke's free-form style. It wasn't just the creative clashes that drove a wedge between them, it was the inconsistency. According to sources close to the production, Rourke would swing between brilliant and belligerent. One day, he'd be emotionally present, dialed into the material. Next, he'd be combative, refusing direction or showing up hours late. Dolph, who prides himself on his professionalism, quickly grew tired of the constant improvisation and last-minute changes. In one interview years later, he reflected diplomatically on the experience, saying, "Some actors follow the script, others follow a mood. Mickey follows the weather." Another issue presented itself regarding what he called respect, or rather, the absence of such respect. Dolph, a gentleman on the set, naturally expected the same consideration toward himself. Rourke, however, reveled in stealing the spotlight during table reads and production meetings. He would mercilessly criticize the dialogue, belittle the choices made by the director, and, if the scenes did not involve him, assail their very importance. Once, in what was to be a crucial scene with Lundgren, Rourke dismissed him with the words, "Don't worry, I'll just feel it out." Such disregard not only upset Dolph, it was a personal affront. Certainly, things took a turn for the worse behind closed doors. During the late-night crew conversations, Rourke was overhead referring to Lundgren as the muscle, not the mind. That really cut to the quick, obviously. No one can reduce you down to being the muscle, not the mind. And imagine it doesn't hurt because Dolph Lundgren, despite looking like quite a big guy and having an action movie legacy behind him, is a looker, is an engineer-trained master's degree fluent-speaking guy who knows a couple of languages and has a rough idea in his mind about the intellectual demands of filmmaking. So such a thing could not be taken lightly by an actor, fellow actor, who that one had once idolized as just a stereotype. It was personal. Everybody strode around with an air of mischief in Southern Europe. Most importantly, an actor was known to disappear between two scenes, sometimes requiring around 4 crew members to locate him when it was time to start shooting. One would regularly see the filming of nights in Eastern Europe halted for several hours during an impromptu wall walk of Rourke through the city, and not returning to the set. Lundgren was now put on hold since the scene had been cast with him. He waited quite long only to explode behind closed doors after a 3-time delay of the week, reportedly saying to producers, "If he's not here when the cameras are ready, shoot around him. I'm done waiting." Despite uncomfortable situations, they managed to finish the movie. The final cut, which had many of Rourke's improvisations edited in, was okay, but insiders say it was a pale imitation of what might have been. The chemistry that those fans would look for between the two titans never happened on screen. Dolph later blamed this on a lack of creative cohesion, countering that, "You can't build tension with someone who won't meet you in the middle." Long after the filming was finished, animosity remained. Rourke avoided all the press journalism during the film's promotion in Europe, leaving Dolph alone to face them all, answering questions even directed toward his co-star. When the possibility of working together in the future came up, Dolph could only muster a few words. "No plans." He added, with some sarcasm, "Mickey works best when he's left alone, preferably on a different movie. Save your shock for the final name." It's the feud no one saw coming. Number 1. Brian Thompson. To most moviegoers, Brian Thompson is a recognizable face from countless roles as the villain, gruff, imposing, often cast as the heavy. But to Dolph Lundgren, Thompson was more than just a B-movie antagonist. He was, in Dolph's eyes, the embodiment of quiet disrespect, a fellow actor who blurred the line between competition and insult, and someone who, intentionally or not, managed to ignite one of the most personal and lingering grudges of Lundgren's long career. Their friction didn't begin on a set or in a shared project. It started in the shadow of Rocky IV, during the whirlwind of fame that followed Dolph's breakout role as Ivan Drago. While Dolph was adjusting to overnight stardom, fielding offers, and stepping into Hollywood's limelight, Thompson was carving out his own career, slowly but steadily rising as one of cinema's go-to bad guys. But there was a quiet buzz going around, casting circles, whispered by agents and echoed in auditions. Thompson had been in the running for the role of Drago. According to industry rumors, he believed he was meant for it. That belief didn't stay within the confines of private life. At industry mixers, at press events, and later on film sets, Thompson made casual remarks comparing himself to Drago, or worse, implying that he would have been able to take the role in a more theatrical or complex way. Initially, Dolph brushed it off. He was conditioned to the behavior of me-first actors, but it was the unrelenting fondness that got under his skin. Thompson didn't just criticize the character, he all but indirectly criticized Dolph as character. "All brute, no depth," he once allegedly said during a panel interview when asked about Cold War-era villains like Drago. "Oh, that was just some mindless crack he spat at a panel, thrown out there for good measure," the crowd laughed. Watching it later, however, for Dolph, it was no laugh. The situation heightened when the two were assessed for an action-abroad military film in the early 90s. Title page credits divided those measuring up with Dolph as the lead and weighed Thompson as a supporting contender for the role of a rival mercenary. Reportedly, Thompson was difficult during the early table read, haggling over lines for maximum screen time, challenging action sequences that made him seem less than the superior combatant to Dolph, but mostly raining backhanded compliments like, "I'm just trying to ensure the scene doesn't read like a powerlifting competition." Usually calm and professional, it is said that by the third rehearsal, Dolph simply walked out, telling the director, "Either he goes or I do." The producers chose Dolph. Years later, the two actors wound up booked for the same convention, which was a large sci-fi and action expo in Las Vegas. That was meant to be a weekend filled with nostalgia for fan meet and greets, panel discussions, and autographs. But the minute that Dolph saw Thompson's booth only 3 tables away, all hell broke loose. According to those who were present, Thompson threw some jabs that bordered on mocking during his Q&A. Referring to the now classic "I must break you" line, he said, "I would have said it with feeling." The quip earned laughter from the crowd, but when it reached Dolph, he decided not to attend his panel that afternoon and instead opted for a closed-door signing for fans. What really secured Thompson's place on Dolph's blacklist, however, was much more than singular insults. It was actually a slow, methodical erosion of respect that played itself out across some years and several incidents. In the action world, rather tight little circle of stars, directors, and shared crews, there exists a code of conduct. Don't undermine a fellow artist's contributions. Don't disparage the performances that fed them. And above all else, never make a name for yourself by dragging down another. In Dolph's view, Thompson violated all 3. Perhaps the outside world sees the feud as exaggerated. After all, Thompson rarely made headlines. It was neither tabloid stuff nor a mega blockbuster. That was precisely what made it worse for Dolph. Not a contender for respect at the very top, Thompson was throwing punches from the sidelines. A full-time antagonist who scaled the heights by pulling others down instead of climbing by merit. It was never loud, never dirty, never explosive. Subtle. That is what hurt. It was one of those rare interviews when Dolph was directly asked about actors he would never work with again. He paused, smiled thinly, and said, "Let's just say there are people who build careers and people who borrow them." Speculation online pointed to a few famous rivals, but for those who knew him, it was the name Brian Thompson that was ringing in their ears. The dispute has never reached the point of visible manifestations of conflict. There were never any brawls, public outbursts, or court summons. It is the silence in which the two seem to exist that weighs heavily. Practically all directors who have ever worked with one director know that the other should remain an absolutely unmentionable topic. At these functions, their handlers make sure that the two are kept on separate panels, leaving enough distance between tables to ward off any chance of an awkward moment. The anger is gone now. It is pure disinterest. For Dolph, Thompson is not even worth confronting. He has been relegated to the irrelevant column for good. Which actor do you think deserved the top spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into behind-the-scenes drama, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And before you go, check out one of the 2 videos on your screen. We've got more untold Hollywood feuds and surprising celebrity rivalries waiting for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.